Have you ever found yourself trapped in the pursuit of more knowledge? Another podcast episode, another book, another certification. You do that all the while your to-do list keeps getting bigger and bigger and untouched. Well, I've been there, and my guest today, Mark Donnigan, struck a chord with me recently that echoed in my mind ever since. It's not the knowledge, it's the execution that makes the difference. On today's episode, we're diving deep into the power of strategic execution, why it separates high-performing podcast guests from those just spinning the wheels, how AI can be your biggest ally or your biggest excuse, and how execution is more than just checking boxes. It's discipline, focus, systems, and results. Whether you're a coach, a consultant, author, or a marketing executive, you'll walk away with actionable insights to stop stockpiling potential and start applying it where it counts. On your podcast interviews, your marketing, and your business growth. If you're ready to shift from ideas to impact, this episode is going to be a game changer for you. Mark, what's ordinary to you is amazing to others. And when we talked the other day, you talked about the power of execution, and that has haunted me ever since.
Haunted you? That doesn't sound good.
Oh, it has haunted me because it is so true. It's not the ideas. It's not the knowledge. It's the execution. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, you're so right, Tom. I have learned through years and years and years of being a perpetual learner. And I love knowledge. I mean, I love books. I was a little bit weird as a kid in that when my mom would drop me and my brother off at the library, so she could run some errands and do some things, that was our babysitter, I guess. I loved it. I mean, to me, it was not jail. It was like, I was so excited, and I had my favorite sections. I was really into electronics as a kid, so I would go, how to build a radio and all these things. But the interesting thing is that as I, grew professionally, I began to realize that, my challenges were not needing more knowledge. And in fact, in some ways, knowledge became a little bit of almost like an excuse for not doing what I knew I needed to do, because guess what? It's a heck of a lot easier to say, oh, I just need one more certification. I need one more course. I need one more program. And again, I'm saying this as someone who's a massive fan of acquiring knowledge, so this isn't, masterminds or education is not important. But at the end of the day, if you don't apply it, and most of us have way more knowledge than we need to really excel at our jobs. And so this is how I arrived there, is just, waking up one day. And when you work in startups, when you work with founders, when every day matters, you learn pretty quickly, like, okay, yes, it would be great if I knew more about this subject, if I knew this market better, if I understood, how to do, whatever it is we need to do, but I don't, and we don't, and yet we have to get the job done. And when you begin to lean into that mode of operation, especially in marketing and especially with where business is today, you realize that what really separates the high performing teams from those that are maybe not as high performing is something as simple as execution, doing the work, just doing the work.
And it applies to everything, right? And as you said that, I'm like, oh yeah, there's times where I'll listen to a podcast so I can learn some more as opposed to actually doing the work. And today, knowledge is not only abundant, it's free.
It's free and it's everywhere.
ChatGPT, I can find out any answer I need to. And it's funny. It's like, it's not the person that has the best answer. It's the person that executes on that. And it makes me think back of Derek Sivers years ago. I remember a blog he wrote. It was like, execution is the multiplier. The idea of a lousy idea is a 1, a great idea is a 10, but poor execution is 100. brilliant execution is a million, right? So you can say, the pet rock is a stupid idea. Yeah. And it was well executed, right?
Well executed, and it generated millions, at least what I've heard anyway, millions of dollars of revenue.
Millions of dollars. So. And so many times I'm focused on how can I get my idea from an 8 to a 9, as opposed to how can I get my execution from 100 to a million.
Yeah. And I think, where this really connects and lands, I work with, technology companies that are, generally in growth stage, which means that they are startups growing up. So they're getting to that juncture of, really starting to generate some market dynamism, product market fit is landed, in other words, they're growth companies. And, it's so fascinating to me how, the problems that I see, I often get contacted by, founders, or investors, executives who are saying, Mark, we think we need your help. We think we need to hire a new CMO or we need to hire a head of marketing or, we think we have a good team, but it's just not working. And so many times I come into the company and my feedback is, nobody's perfect, including me. So sure, the leader you have in place, they're probably, they need to grow in this area. Yeah, they certainly don't know what they should know in this other area. But you know what? By and large, when you look at what their strategies are, their tactics, everything makes sense. And they're competent. I mean, look, they've got 12, 15-year track record, so guess what? You replace them, you're just going to kind of bring another version of that person in. That's not your problem. Your problem is that your engine is gummed up, you're not executing. And so let's figure out why they're not executing. Is it resource issues? Is it process? Maybe you as the founder have your fingers in and, everything has to run by you. And guess what? That approval process is causing them to not be able to deliver. That could be your problem, but so much comes back to execution, that now my mantra is execution trumps almost everything. Literally, it really does, including the most brilliant strategy.
Everybody's got access to the same knowledge, right? No matter what it is, you can pretty much ask ChatGPT, right? Everything that I've learned about podcast interview marketing, I've talked about, right? So you can go out there and get it. The difference is executing in it. And, we talk a lot about AI, but, for a long time, I would listen to people's different interviews and be able to point out right away, well, you didn't execute on this. You didn't do this. And, people would say, well, do I have to do all of those? No, it's like baking a cake. You're a grown man. If you don't want to put the baking soda, in it or the baking powder, whatever it is, you don't have to, right? But you're not going to like the results with it. So as opposed to just baking more cakes or hiring a new CMO or doing more interviews, figure out what's not working in that execution and then do that, as opposed to just trying to double down on something that's not working.
And we're all being asked to do more with less. I say we're being asked as if, it's this new thing. It's funny, isn't it? How, since when did we think that we could just throw money away and that was okay? It doesn't matter. It's branding. We can't justify going to that event. It's $100,000, but it'll be great for our brand. And now it sounds ridiculous, right? And yet that is how too many companies operated and marketing teams operated for too many years. Now everybody's sort of, hopefully they have adjusted, because if not, they're in trouble. But now we're like, the new normal, we have to do more with less. And sometimes I scratch my head and I go, when did we not have to? I guess I never got that memo. But the point is that when you execute, it also causes you to have to deal with your constraints. And I really firmly believe that constraints are actually what make people great, organizations great, companies great, it's constraints. When you have unlimited money, well, you can see what it does to people. Generally speaking, it doesn't work out so well. Look at the lottery winners, not a very good track record of people who won $100 million and their life getting better. Usually their life got way worse and they lost that 100 million. And the same happens with companies, right? So being forced to do more with less now means that, I have to actually say, okay, why are we doing this set of activities? Why are we marketing in these manners? Does it really make sense to go to that trade show that we've gone to the last 8 years? Well, yes, because we've gone the last 8 years. No, but does it really make sense? That market has shifted and our product no longer works in that market. Yeah, but we've gone the last 8 years. You're not hearing me, So that's the execution is both on the literal getting the work done, but also really, really being vigilant and saying, why are we doing the things we're doing? And how does that grow our business? How does that grow our category? How does that contribute to growing us as people even, if we want to get really personal.
Do you think it's even more important for the smaller the business is? Because I can remember talking to a retiring CEO. He was doing a book to launch his new brand and we helped him on the virtual book tour. And he made the point that he was running a huge publicly traded company. And he's like, what I do will not change the needle that much, right? He's like, if I do great, okay, the stock price goes up a little bit. He's like, if I do poorly, I get fired in a golden parachute. But he says, you as a small business, what you execute on will either make you or break you, right? It'll either take you to the next level or you're betting the farm every time, right? And for some people, it's their livelihood, it's their paycheck. They could have loans against it. So everything they do, they've got
becomes really personal and practical.
Yeah.
Right?
I can't do 10 things poorly or 10 things mediocre. I've got to figure out that one thing and execute really well on it.
So yes, I mean, I fundamentally totally agree, but there's something fascinating that I think, for those who are employees, or, you're a part of maybe a little bit of a larger team. I would argue that, there is a real threat of AI taking a lot of our jobs. Now that's controversial, right? And we can get in all kinds of philosophical discussions, right? But I think, you sort of have to have your head, like, as they say, buried in the sand to pretend that, the ability for those of us who are knowledge workers, which is probably the vast majority, if not all of your listeners, to this podcast. And, we're knowledge workers, right? We're paid to acquire or to utilize and to apply the knowledge we have acquired. That's fundamentally, whether that's marketing, whether it's sales, whether it's engineering, whether it's, if we don't act as individuals in this same manner, as if I am a company of one, I'm the CEO of one, I am the CEO of Mark Donnigan, and it's my job to apply knowledge and to have as much impact in the organization. Now that may be just as an individual contributor, on a team. It may be as a mid-level manager. It could be a CEO of a small company. It could be CEO of a Fortune 100, in other words, it doesn't matter the level. We should be operating, and structuring our professional lives, that way. And those who do that are never going to have to worry about being replaced by AI or being found redundant because guess what? Your contributions are going to shine. Those who try and sort of, shrink back into, I'm just going to try and ride this out as long as I can. I'm going to try and stay, keep my head below the chopping block, all that kind of stuff are unfortunately probably at very high risk.
It's the the category pirates, I think, refer to it as creator capitalists, right? The idea that I'm a knowledge worker and you're going to have me here because I know this, I've got this degree, I've got these letters behind my name. You're not hired for knowledge anymore. You're hired for what you create. And that's the creativity, the knowledge, the execution. And that's one of those things, that net new creation that makes you more valuable, not replaceable.
That's right. That's right. And, I've been leaning heavily into, AI, both personally, but professionally. And I work as I position myself as like a virtual CMO, but in reality, I work with a very small number of companies, one or two, sometimes I'm, kind of advising a few, here and there. But I work for very long periods of time. My longest running client is 5 years and not ending. My average clients are 2 to 3 years. So, I don't sort of drop in and do a 3 or 6 month project. Nothing wrong with that. That's just not that's not the way that I work. What's really fascinating is that, I always felt that small teams beat big teams. It's a little bit of maybe that sort of Navy SEAL or special forces type, where it's like, why does a team that can be highly effective do these impossible missions? And it's only, 6, 8, 10 soldiers, right? On the ground. And yet, when you learn later what they did, you're like, how did just 6 people go in there in this impossible scenario and make this happen and get undetected and everybody left without a scratch? They achieved their mission. Like, how is that possible? So I've always believed in marketing that a small team of 6, 8, 10, maybe 12 people will beat 30, 40, 50 all day long. I mean, all day long. I've practiced it. I've seen way too much evidence of that. And anybody who's worked in those large teams will probably go, yeah, that's right. The bureaucracy and the process and everything just weighs everybody down. But with AI, suddenly I don't need 10 people. I need 3 or 4, and 3 or 4 augmented with the technology. Now, it has to be 3 or 4 of the right people. I'm not saying just 3 or 4 kind of random generalists, who know how to open up ChatGPT and say, give me a blog post. That's not what I'm talking about. But so I've leaned heavily into AI. And what I've found is that this is the best application of what the humans do well and what the machines do well. Because we as humans, have the ability to hold opposing ideas. We have the ability to look at a market, analyze a market, think of a market, both the incredible opportunity and the incredible challenges, be able to hold these opposing ideas. AI struggles with that. Now, AI can write an amazing paper that writes all of the pros and all the cons and articulates it and everything. But, there's no LLM that at least I am using today that is able to do what I can do, where I can look across a market, I look across an industry, I look across an ecosystem, and I can balance this. And then I can make decisions and judgments as to, what the messages need to be, how we're going to approach it, what our optimal channels are. And so when you take that and then the execution, connecting this back to execution, is with the LLMs, who then can formulate incredible content, can come up with some great strategies within these frameworks that the humans have developed. Now you have like a force multiplier. And so now not only did we take our team from 30 or 40 or 50 to like 10 or 12, we took the 10 or 12 down to 3 or 4, and we're producing better, faster. And I don't mean by like a small margin, like 10%. I mean like by 2x, 3x better. some would argue even 10x in some cases. And across the companies that I've had the pleasure, to support and to work with over the years, especially over the last 3 or 4, years or so, one of the hallmarks is, Mark, how do you guys represent so big? It's one of the things I'm most proud of is when, people understand, you mean you only have like a handful of marketers and you're doing all this? That's impossible. I'm like, no, it's very possible. This is what we're doing. And, it's just about that execution, but doing it with the right tools, and also a new mindset. You have to think different. So, rather than thinking, okay, I need to hire a team of writers. I need to hire a team of designers. I need to hire, I need a social media team. Like, I never quite understood that. You need a social media. Yeah, we need a Facebook master. Like, Facebook master, don't you use Facebook?
And when you were talking about that, it reminded me of a couple things. One, Mike Maples Jr. over at Floodgate Capital was recently talking on pattern breakers, and he's got a small Silicon Valley.
I love that book, by the way. That book is amazing.
Great book. And he pointed out that the big agencies might have 100 analysts, and you take all the deals and you put it to the analysts and they go through them unless they're on vacation or it's a holiday. But he's built up the GPTs and to say, this is what I look for in there. And he can go through 100 deals while he sleeps, right? Overnight. And we even saw this for years. I've always been listening to the first couple of interviews that our clients do, right? To give feedback. And, it's typically, Mark, you talk too fast compared to the host, stuff like that. And everybody goes, well, no, I don't. Right. And what I found was it was my opinion, and it would take me 45 minutes to listen to the interview, then another 15 minutes to record a video with the feedback. And it was just my opinion. And so we started to think, and we've been working on this for better part of a year, of what are the things that we look at? What makes a difference? And we were able to boil it down into 15 different points. Now we can take any interview, put it in there, and come back and say, you spoke 26% faster than the host. Tom, your monologue was 7 minutes and 12 seconds, right? Shorten up your answers, things like that. Or even say, this is the vital thing. This is why your interview didn't convert, right? And things like that can be so powerful and timely for people, because before they would queue up for me. Now we give that to all of our clients after their first interviews. And because we want them to learn and get better, we don't want to tell them, 6 months afterwards when they've already done a dozen interviews.
Yeah. And this, it's interesting, going back to what's the real application today? We could have a whole nother 2 or 3 or 4 or a dozen interviews talking about AI and the real practical applications. But, and I think a lot of people, kind of fundamentally know this, but where the LLMs are just a gold mine, for knowledge workers, is how they are able to look at unstructured data. And so the things like even analyzing speech patterns or, if they're just looking at text, looking at, how I write and giving feedback on that, or organizing, multiple ideas and concepts that, maybe I know I'm struggling to kind of articulate, or maybe I think I'm articulating really well, but I'm actually not, and that's where the LLMs are just so powerful. And, some people might be listening right now saying, well, how does this now you're talking about AI and LLMs. How does this connect to execution? It has everything to do with execution, because not only do we need to do more with less, today, but we need to do better with less. And it's that, and I really firmly believe that, is that it's not just about, oh, wow, I can reduce my marketing team from 10 people to 4. Isn't that amazing? Look at the savings. No, in reality, we're taking that resource spend, those salaries and, the other costs around that. And now we're able to go do other things in marketing. So in some cases, the net spend is the same. Not in all, there are plenty of times where it's like, okay, we can return that to the P&L, which is needed. But we're doing better. We're able to do better, and let the humans, optimize where they can do with the machine.
It's about getting more, not just doing more. And, often one of the things that we have used it for too is to know what to execute on, right? Because there's a dozen ideas. I could do this. I could do that. And often it becomes the recency fallacy, right? Of whatever was there last, and be able to take someone's, last 10 interviews and say, here's 10 things. Here's the 2 that would make the biggest difference. Right? That is powerful, right? It's like, that 80-20 rule. This is the 20% that'll give you 80% of that. And just the clarity that comes around that to make sure that we're executing on the right things. So I know, we were talking before about AI in podcasts, and I think there's some great, amazing things going on there. There's some that are a little bit, weird, right? The founder of LinkedIn, interviewed himself, with his AI clone and everything like that. And it was like, wow, that was a little bit different, but I think there's some really promising things. And, can you share where your mind is going on this?
Yeah, I can. And I'm investing, I already said it. I'm investing very heavily in building AI, agents and workflows. And I'm really, when I say I'm all in, I am all in. I'm building tools. So where I'm going with this in terms of AI generated podcast is I think in a different direction. And again, some of the listeners might be, wait a second, Tom, why is this guy talking about using AI to replace us? Like, what's this all about? Here's the fact. The fact is, again, I'm a marketer. I work in B2B. I work in technology. I work with tech founders. It's the world that I'm in. And, there is no doubt. And if people are, for listeners to the show, of course, they believe in podcasts. So don't have to convince anybody that podcasts work. But podcasts work. Newsflash. It's just such a phenomenal way to gather information for busy executives, for just anybody. And so much I'm finding of buyers' journeys today, especially when it's a considered purchase, and especially when there's a lot of detail and of technical information that's needed. And I don't mean just like, I need to be able to go to the website and download a white paper or get access to a data sheet. I mean, there's so much more required around the purchase. And I think, for a lot of buying journeys today, they've just gotten really complicated. There's more stakeholders involved. There's more technology considerations. There's integration considerations. So all that to say, podcasts are a great way for people to learn and discover and get information. So then you say, okay, well, great. Well, I just need to, convince the founders, that they need to start a show and, and we'll be good to go. Well, there are so many practical reasons why founders, struggle, getting to shall we say, a regular cadence of being able to do a show. And yes, there's a handful of founders that are just born for being out in front of the mic and in front of the camera. And, we have plenty of examples, right? They're on LinkedIn. There's a lot of great examples. They're real content creators, and that's wonderful if you happen to work with or you're supporting someone like that. But for everybody else, which is the majority, it's not comfortable. Their life is busy. Their life is chaotic. And so I looked at this and said, how do I solve this? Because I can sort of just throw in the towel, and say, well, yeah, podcasts are great. We should do a show, but this CEO can never, will never do it for the reasons I just stated. Or we can never do it on a reliable cadence. Like, let's not bother. Let's just forget podcasting. So, I started looking about a year ago at, when 11 Labs, and I think 11 Labs has been out now for, I don't know, a couple years at least, maybe 3 years, but, really in the last couple of years, their models have really exploded. And I started experiments just with my voice, and I went, wow, this is good. This is like, I still know it's not me. And I did the usual experiments we all did. I would send a file, or I would send something to somebody and just be like, hey, check out what I recorded, and I would get back one of 2 or 3 responses. One was, wow, that's amazing. I love the information. When did you record that? Meaning like they thought it was me. I'd get one that's like, wow, that was really good. Are you by chance using AI? I'm not sure, and then I get one like, okay, nice try. That's clearly not you, but it was very few. Well, I started building a workflow, and we're just about to launch a version that is fully automated, takes a PDF in. So it could be a blog post. It could be a white paper. It could be anything. Now, obviously, quality of the content in determines quality of the conversation out. So, so it's, but puts together a fully produced show. And this is not Notebook LM. No knock on Notebook LM. I actually started there. I started by taking Notebook LM interviews and then bookending with, kind of an intro and then an outro and then put some music on it. And that was my original, was just to even see like, would this even work? What is it? Would people accept it? Now it is a fully narrated, with my voice cloned, with whoever the principal or the guest or the host is, for whichever company or whoever I'm doing this for. And we have a conversation, and it's amazing. It's really amazing. And what it does is not replace. The whole objective is not that, we no longer need people, because there still is no substitute for this interaction that we're having right here. Even scripted. I've even gone so far as to, the AI will add ums and uhs and filler words. And because what I found was when it was too perfect, it wasn't natural. And also it talks in incomplete sentences. Because guess what? If we translate what even the way I'm talking, like if I wrote a blog post the way I'm talking, it'd be like, oh, Mark, you need somebody to do some copy editing. And yet when we're listening, it's perfectly natural. It's normal. The brain fills in. It's like, so I learned a lot about, making grammatically perfect interviews. Actually sounds really unnatural, but still there's not that interaction, when, there's not that natural human. But what I found is that there is certain types of content, there are certain types of conversations where the value is as much in the information being shared as it is in the personal dynamic. Not to say it can be sterile and still be accepted. No, it has to feel human. But there are degrees, like I can never imagine Joe Rogan, just to use one example, like, can you imagine Joe Rogan doing his show with AI? Like, totally would not work, right?
It's already been proven before AI. Because I can think of a podcast, I'm not going to say which one it is, but it is the blogs that they have written. And this is probably 5 years ago they started it, and they had a very pleasant female voiceover artist that would read the blogs. And it was a great podcast. But you know what? Nobody ever caught on to that because the people that were reading the blogs were not the people that were listening. Because, what a great time we have today of we can create in the way that's easiest for us and then repurpose in the way that's easiest for others. And then you can even take that to the next level, right? I don't speak Spanish, but we have Invaluable Español. A third of our team is bilingual. So we have some, Spanish language podcasts, and our team about a year ago went to HeyGen, right? The video AI, and they translated a video. Yeah. They translated the video into Spanish, and you would have swore that I was a Spanish speaker. So that same way, if that CEO can create one in English, they can do it in any language there. And really, talk about creating in the way that's easiest for you and then using technology to repurpose in the way that's easiest for someone else.
Absolutely. And, it's just such an exciting time. It's why I sometimes am just puzzled as my reaction when I'm around people who are not optimistic, about both technology, but especially AI. And believe me, I understand there's a lot of questions around safety and around, there definitely are concerns that are completely legitimate. What happens when the machines take over, and what does happen, what does the future of work look like? And, there's certain jobs that are clearly at real perennial risk, and I get all that. So I'm not discounting at all. But still there is the optimistic view is there is so much potential that is just frankly amazing. And, I'm just leaning into it. And in the context of our conversation around execution, I'm also finding that what it does is it allows me both personally and professionally to get more work done at a higher level than I ever could have done on my own. Just frankly speaking. And all of us like to believe that we're doing pretty good work before, and I certainly, do. So, I would like to think it's not that I was doing bad work. But I look at, whether it's the content that I'm producing or whether it's the strategies or whether it's the way that I'm able to package and frame up, my thoughts on an important subject or, an important initiative. It's just better.
I want to reflect a word that you said there. You said there is so much potential, and you're so right with that, because so many people will say there's so much power in that. No, it's potential. And it goes back to, I say the biggest lie I've ever been told is on my college ring, right? Came from the Naval Academy. It's in Latin. It sounds really, impressive, right? But it translates to knowledge is sea power. And it's like, no, it's not, right? The best boxer is not the one that is the most knowledgeable. No, it's the one that executes on it. So all of these things are great potential, right? Knowledge is potential. It's not till it's applied that it becomes power.
Exactly. And that's the important nuance to unpacking that word potential. Is it, just like we all have known people, right? Maybe kids we grew up with or those we met later in life where, you often reflect back and go, they had so much potential and they never tapped into it, or they never were able to, kind of unlock it, and I just think that is the great reshuffling in careers today, in companies, ecosystems, industries. It's those people, those companies, those organizations that really execute on their potential. Well, they're the winners, and they're going to be the winners.
Leaving it on that, I think of, and someday I never want somebody to come back and say, wow, Tom had so much potential, or this company, Interview Valet, had so much potential, because that's sort of an insult. But no, they executed on this and they were at the leading edge. They weren't always doing it right, but they were always learning as they went. Boy, if you think about what do you want said later on about yourself or your company, that's sort of an impetus to start executing.
I think it's great. There's this trend towards, vibe marketing and vibe coding. And, this is the hot new, vibe. And what is vibe about? Vibe is about execution. There's some great vibe marketers that I follow. And I mean, it seems like daily, if not daily, every 2-3 days, they're putting up videos with some new workflow that they just created seemingly on the fly. In some cases, they're doing it live, right there, and recording a video. And, the potential and the fun and the ability to really take an idea and literally within minutes have it executed, or at least begin the process of execution. And we're shorten that time from I have an idea to I actually am able to manifest that idea, whatever that means, create a campaign or create a video or create a podcast or, whatever. But, wow, what an amazing time we live in, is really what it comes down to. But you have to do the work and then put the time in to get educated, learn the tools, et cetera, to be able to take that idea, use the tools, and then execute. Otherwise, going back to where we started, we're just acquiring knowledge, and we can talk a lot, but we're not doing so much.
Well, Mark, what's ordinary to you is amazing to others, right? I've enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure other people have. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah. So LinkedIn, I mean, really, just type in Mark Donnigan, and I'm sure probably the link will be somewhere in the show notes or wherever, description. But, I'm on LinkedIn. My website, if you're interested in what I do on the marketing side, I have a ton of, I think, really good content, but I get great feedback on it. My website is growthstage.marketing. So it's a .marketing domain. So it's just growthstage.marketing. And I've got some mini books up there. I talk about this concept called the marketing pod. Also have, just a lot of other great B2B, marketing resources.
I highly encourage you to check out Mark's work. He underestimates himself there. This idea of the marketing pod and everything that he's doing there, is just making the most of what we've got today. So Mark, thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. It's really great, coming on and speaking to you again. Thank you.
What an episode. Mark reminded us all of this hard truth. In today's world, knowledge is free, but results are reserved for those who can execute. Now, if you're a podcast guest, here's what it means to you. Stop obsessing over the perfect idea and start implementing with precision. Don't just show up prepared. Nail your key points. Make your CTAs clear. Promote every interview like it's your next big stage, because you know what? It is. And don't fall into the trap of thinking you need to do more interviews. You need to do better interviews. Review your last 10 interviews. What worked? What didn't? What did you drop the ball on with regards to execution? That's where growth really begins. Now, if you need help pinpointing the gaps, that's exactly what we do at Interview Valet. Our system isn't about just potential or more interviews. It's about podcast interview outcomes. Go to interviewvalet.com and discover how we can help you and your clients go from guests to thought leaders, from interviews to income. Until next time, remember, ideas are everywhere. Execution is everything.